Cowboys needed a win. They got the win. And I'm not saying that this makes us view the Cowboys any differently. I still view Dallas as a team that will compile a bunch of wins throughout the season. And then when push comes to shove and they get into the bigger games on their schedule or the bigger games in the postseason, you will see the team that is more similar to what we saw 2 weeks ago up against the San Francisco 49ers. So we will circle back to the Cowboys in just a bit. But the Chargers are one of the more disappointing teams in the NFL. And I can't say I'm surprised by the Chargers' inconsistencies because this has been what the Chargers have been all about for the last 20 years. But when I'm watching that game last night and I see all the talent they have on the offensive side of the ball, where you have Justin Herbert, you have Austin Eckler, you have a solid offensive line, you have Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston, the rookie that they drafted out of TCU, the two tight ends as well. This is an offense, even though the Cowboys have a good, solid defense, that should be able to put up more than 17 points in the game last night. This is an offense that every game should be able to score bare minimum 3 touchdowns. And Brandon Staley is lost as a head coach. He should have not have been the coach entering this season. He was. And their big offseason acquisition was bringing in Kellen Moore. And I don't know if there's a more overrated coach in the league than Kellen Moore. Because Kellen Moore was supposed to be all that in Dallas. Kellen Moore is supposed to be a head coach. And then it doesn't work at the end in Dallas. And then his next job is an offensive coordinator with the Chargers. And he's walked into a really good situation. And if it wasn't just his name, Kellen Moore, I would be saying, why the heck is he the offensive coordinator of the Chargers? And what does he do really well? Because the two of them, Brandon Staley and Kellen Moore, are like Dumb and Dumber. And they should not be the head coach and the offensive coordinator for a roster that is loaded with talent in the Los Angeles Chargers. And the Chargers are not going to reach their full potential this year. The Chargers are continuing to be an inconsistent team, and they are extremely frustrating. So when I'm watching that last night, I kind of already waved the white flag, where I don't want to give the players a pass because Herbert, for example, has to, I know they ended up getting a touchdown the next play, but when it's 3rd and goal and you have Austin Eckler wide open, you can't wait. You can't hesitate. You can't take a second and a half to eventually throw the ball to Austin Eckler because then the defender catches up to him and you get stopped just short of the end zone. Then they go for it on 4th and goal and they hit the tight end for a touchdown. But you have these players for the Chargers that will get a pass because of who the coach and who the offensive coordinator is, and that's where we all gravitate to voice our frustration. But that offensive line did a phenomenal job for about 57, 56 minutes of the game last night, and then that final drive, Micah Parsons did what Planet players do, and that's show up in a big spot when you've been quiet for most of the game, and you also had Stephon Gilmore show up as well. But when you're paying your quarterback that much money and you are giving Justin Herbert a lucrative contract, I don't care who the defense is, bare minimum, you have to march the ball, matriculate the ball down the field, and bare minimum, get a field goal to send that game to overtime. And the Chargers couldn't even do that. So the Chargers are so frustrating. The players are going to continue to get a pass nationally because we all know Brandon Staley isn't that dude, and also Kellen Moore should not be the offensive coordinator of this team. So I started to think last night, because it is inevitable that at the end of the season, or you would hope, unless the Spanos family just continues to be cheap owners, you would hope that Brandon Staley is no longer the coach. Because when I just simply look at Brandon Staley's tenure, what does he do well? He builds good relationships with players. He does a good job in being consistent in terms of his teams are always not performing to the level they should be. And he does these boneheaded decisions where he's too aggressive. But through almost 3 years now of Brandon Staley, there's been so much negativity and there's been such an outcry that he isn't the guy. It's like, I can't even think of the really positive things that he does. Like, if you ask me what's 3 positive things about Brandon Staley, well, he's a defensive-minded guy. His defense stinks. And the offense, even with some offensive background that he has, with all the talent, they've not taken that next step forward. So the more and more I go through it, the only positive thing I could say about Brandon Staley is that it appears that the players like him. And then also, he got the team to the playoffs last year. But with this talent, I don't need a coach that, oh, my players like you because you're player friendly. And I don't need a coach that could just get you to the playoffs. I need a coach that could go win. I need a coach that could go uplift this franchise and take them to levels that they've never been before. Because whether you believe in the Chargers or not, it is a fact that this team is loaded with talent. And every year, even going back to Phillip Rivers, and now continuing here with Justin Herbert, and some of that has to go in the quarterback, I'm cognizant of that. You look at the Chargers and you expect them to charger. And it was almost as if it was the perfect matchup between the Chargers and the Cowboys, because you knew the Chargers were going to charger, and the Cowboys tried to choke that game away too last night with the muff punt that set up the Chargers right on the 20. That should be an easy touchdown. They had to wait till 4th and goal to get the ball in the end zone. And then Dallas almost didn't get the field goal lead. It's 3rd down, and there's 2 penalties on the defense on 3rd and long. That's another part. You could have almost got off the field or set yourself up to get off the field. And eventually Dallas, I don't even want to say they moved the ball, but Dallas did get down the field a little bit, and they had to settle for a field goal. Now, Dak had Tony Pollard wide open. I know Pollard is smaller. He's not a receiver there, being a running back. He may have got hit a little bit by Murray. That could have disrupted the timing. But you have a guy that's wide open. You got to make sure that that's a touchdown. And it wasn't. So then they had to kick the field goal. So that was like a seesaw ride last night where the Chargers chargered and the Cowboys did everything in their power to try to choke the game away and lose the game. But the biggest thought from that last night is it just once again reiterates that Brandon Staley, through 3 years of being the Chargers coach, is just not the guy. And the Los Angeles Chargers, after this season, have to get rid of Dumb and Dumber in Brandon Staley and also Kellen Moore. And you start to say, give me 3 names that could come in there and give me 3 names that could be the next coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. And number 1, Bill Belichick. Number 2, Jim Harbaugh. And the third name is Eric Bieniemy. And let's start with Belichick. Belichick should want out of New England. Belichick should look at Brady and say, Brady realized he wasn't going to win again in New England, and he joined the team in Tampa Bay that was more talented. Belichick constructed this roster in New England, and he knows this roster isn't good enough. They're heading to a top 5, top 10 pick of the draft. If I'm Belichick, I'm begging Robert Kraft to fire him, to trade him at the end of the year, and I want to go to Los Angeles Chargers. Because Belichick could still coach. I don't believe Belichick all of a sudden is this dog bleep coach. I don't buy that. If you give Bill Belichick Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams when he comes back next year, Bosa, Khalil Mack, he'll have that team at 12 or 13 wins, competing for an AFC West crown and competing for a Super Bowl. There's no doubt about it. I just don't know how realistic it is to go get Bill Belichick. But it makes sense for the Chargers, and it makes sense for Bill. The question just becomes, will the Patriots allow it? And let's just say, if the Pats don't get rid of Belichick, and they want to see this thing through in New England because Belichick won 6 Super Bowls for them and saved the franchise. If the next call isn't Jim Harbaugh, and I don't know if Harbaugh's definitely leaving Michigan, but there is that pending issue with the NCAA where he had to sit out, self-imposed by the university, a 3-game suspension this year, and they tried to agree to a 4-game suspension. The NCAA, the Committee of Infractions, wanted him to admit that he lied to them over some like cheeseburger nonsense, and Harbaugh wouldn't do it. So you would think that bare minimum, another game, if not 2 more games, are coming on Jim Harbaugh for a suspension. And I know it's been talked about with the contract, and maybe they're going to get a long-term extension done soon between the Wolverines and Jim Harbaugh. But I could see Jim Harbaugh maybe win a national championship this year and saying, I don't want to deal with the nonsense and the petulant behavior of the NCAA, and going right back to the NFL where he still has that itch of, I was so close when I was the coach of the 49ers, where in 4 years I went to 3 NFC title games and also went to a Super Bowl where I lost to my brother in John Harbaugh. So those are the two names that the Chargers have to circle. And they at least have to try to take a swing. Because the worst thing that you could hear from Belichick or that you could hear from Jim Harbaugh is no. There's no harm in trying to allure Belichick and Harbaugh to join the Chargers. But if you can't get those two, you have to give a call to Eric Bieniemy, who's done a nice job with the Commanders, who have good talent, but not great talent, and he knows the heck out of the Kansas City Chiefs, who everyone's chasing in the NFL, and you're chasing inside your own division in the AFC West. And not only that, he's deserving of an opportunity, and I believe he's someone that is the opposite of Brandon Staley. And that's what you need. You need someone that is the complete antithesis of Brandon Staley, where Brandon Staley's all about like, oh, thanks for showing up to work. We love you. Here's a participation trophy. Oh, I'm always going to say nice, positive things about you. Bieniemy, what was the one criticism he received where Ron Rivera threw him under the bus, which was ridiculous right before the start of the season? Oh, he's too tough on the players. Yeah, because that's something that should matter in the NFL. If that's a legit criticism of a coach, it says more about your players than the actual coach. And I'm not saying you need a dictator in the NFL now. I'm not saying you need a my way or the highway guy, but you need a coach that has the respect of the locker room, and you need a coach that can really put his foot down and make it clear that this is his team and we're going about things one way, and whatever happened with the last coach clearly held you guys back, and now we need to thrive and now we need to soar. Because once they make that change at the end of the year with Brandon Staley, the new coach is going to be under pressure. But whoever they bring in, the players now are no longer going to be let off the hook because attention's going to start to be drawn to Justin Herbert. They paid you all this money. You have all this talent, and you're not winning enough games. So that game last night, it was frustrating on both sides. If you're a Cowboys fan, you wipe the sweat off your head and you go, whoo, thank God for surviving that one and winning that one, because if you would have been 3-3 after 6 games, it would have been a catastrophe for Cowboys fans today. And on the other side, if you're a Chargers fan, for all like 9 of you that exist, you're sitting back and you're saying, another wasted season, another year where we have to deal with this guy, Brandon Staley, who's just not fit right now to be an NFL head coach, and we're going to continue to be let down, and we're going to continue to get disappointed. So Chargers fans, instead of just voicing your frustration today, instead of just saying how annoyed you are with Brandon Staley, start compiling a list and have your list of 3 names that you want coaching this team next year. Number 1 should be Belichick. Number 2 should be Jim Harbaugh. And if you can't get those 2, I would be jumping up and down if I was a Chargers fan, like a fat kid in a candy store, if I could get Eric Bieniemy. One of those 3 guys have to be the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers next year.